Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thrive City Podcast.
Let's go.
Glad you guys could join us today.
Yeah.
My name is Saryta, and this is my lovely anointed co-host.
Come on.
The good Reverend
Right.
Dr. GL
I'm
Colbert.
not a doctor yet.
But though this is my awesome co-host who holds it down in many ways.
Come on. I try to do what I can do when I can do it.
And I appreciate all of it.
Absolutely.
Greg Colbert.
Uh-huh.
So again, we're just really glad that you guys were able to join us today. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with our infamous question of the day.
Yeah.
You ready for this?
I don't know. These questions that we ask at the beginning, we don't tell each other what they're going to be, so they're completely unscripted.
They are. He's going to love this one. He's going to love this one. I mean, we were supposed to bring questions that like create a little bit of a dialogue, and this is more of a yes or no kind of question, but
I'm so interested.
I'm sure you can you'll be able to add a little something to it. Okay. You ready for this? Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. So, when you are home alone, I'm not there, nobody else is there, it's just you.
Yeah.
Do you close the bathroom door when you go poop?
I was not ready for that question.
I figured you wouldn't
all
be.
the way up to the actual ending of your question.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, do you close the door or do you not close the door to like the room and sing or something like that?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope. We getting it up close and personal today.
So the truth is, and I don't even know why you would want to know this, but I do not close the door because it's not necessary.
Really?
I close the door when people are home for privacy.
So you just let all the stank out when, ooh.
I do. I do.
That's just a shame.
You've never come home and been like, did you leave that door open? That's never been the experience.
No, but I think I've come home a few times and been like,
What's that smell?
what's that smell? I mean, you say I got superhuman smell anyway.
You do. She's had 4 children, and I am convinced that every time you have a kid, your smelling ability increases. I tell her she has prophetic smell.
Not prophetic.
She
I smell
knows
it before it
when
happens.
someone is going to fart, and it hasn't happened yet.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's too much. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into the meat of what we're going to be talking about on today's podcast. So what you're going to see with our podcast as you kind of follow along with us on our journey is you'll see some podcasts that provide like an update of the church planting journey that we are on, right? Because we are planting Thrive City Church.
Yeah, so, actually, can I give you an update?
Sure.
This is live. This is live and in person. So I actually got an email from a pastor last night from California.
Wow.
And he said, hey, just wanted to let you know who I am, introduce myself. I'm a pastor in California. We just planted a church about 7 months ago. And he pretty much was like, he had to have the whole mask situation for pregnancy. When we were talking about that in the one podcast episode, he was
funny.
like, it was great to hear someone else needed a mask for the birthing smells, right? But then he also said, he was like, you know what? I can appreciate, and I want to just commend you guys for taking us on the journey with you. He said, because when they were planting the church, they were looking for like testimonials and like what a couple goes through when it comes to planting a church. And he's like, you can't really find too much.
Yeah.
He said, so he's looking forward to like every episode to watch to kind of see the process. And he said this, he feels like it's going to be extremely helpful to pastors that are going to be planting in the future. So I was like, man, that's encouraging.
That really is.
Pastor Kobe, shout out to you, bro.
I say that I should probably follow kind of what I felt like I got, where I said, I think a lot of times you see, the lead pastor, the husband is the one that does a lot of the talking, that's up front, shares a lot of the journey. And I think there is a piece of it where the wife, the co-pastor, whatever your title may be, the first lady, there's a part that we go through too when it comes to planting a church.
Ain't that the truth?
And I think that we probably should do our due diligence and have something for that group of individuals too.
I think that's
so
good.
That's something, we might see coming up soon. Don't hold me to it, but I'll do my best to bring something. So like I said, we pretty much, what you're going to see on our journey is you're going to see some of our podcasts that just bring you into the journey, the step-by-step, the bloopers, the mistakes, the triumphs, the things that we do that where we overcome some of the great things that happen, and maybe even some of the not so great things that happen.
I think
with
those
church
are
planting.
actually more valuable in many times.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, me too, bruh.
Yeah, but help people learn even from some of our mistakes and stuff like that. So you'll see updates, and then you'll also be able to see some podcasts that are going to be talking about our vibes and values. They're going to be talking about the things that are near and dear to the heart of Thrive City Church. So today's episode is actually going to be about one of our vibes and values. So if you've seen any of our previous podcasts, we did do one already, and so today we're going to be talking about one of them specifically. You want to tell them what that vibe and value is for today?
The vibe and value for today is going to be integrity is our identity. Ooh.
Fun. So we actually have 9 different vibes and values. And some of you may be like, well, what is a vibe and value? It pretty much is just the characteristics that define our church. Yeah. So it's different values that we have that aren't external to who we are as individuals. It actually is who we are from the core of us. And we decided to take those core values, those core characteristics, those core things about us that we believe in and that we really live our life out of. And we created these 9 vibes and values for our church. And as I said, we're going to be talking about integrity today. Yeah. And as you said, we're going to be talking about integrity today. So let's talk about what that core value is. What can you read it for us? Can you tell us what it says?
I can read it. But actually, before we read it, though, I think it was we were having a conversation with the kids just recently. And I kind of want you to share that dynamic because I think it actually will help with kind of the journey that we're going on.
Okay. All right. So the other day, we were sitting down having a conversation with our boys. So if you don't know, we have 4 boys. 4. They range from the age of 14 to 24.
Help us with these groceries.
They do eat us out of house and home.
House and home.
So they range from the age of 14 to 24. So it was just something I felt really in the moment. They had just come home from school. It was the end of the semester. And I just felt like we needed to encourage them and let them know that they had done a great job up until this point. Yeah. So we wanted to affirm them. We wanted to make sure that they knew that the hard work that they put in, the goals that they had set for themselves, that they did a great job accomplishing them. And so in the moment, one of the things that I said was I was telling them that we were so thankful for them being boys who lived their life with integrity. Yeah. And so one of them was like, well, what exactly is integrity?
That's a great question.
Like, what does that actually mean? And so we asked them, like, okay, tell us what you think integrity means. And they were able to give like circumstances in which you act in integrity, or circumstances that they showed up and they were integrous individuals in those moments, but they couldn't give an actual definition of what the word integrity meant. So I was like, I'm more of I'll lean on let's make it like really simple and easy. I feel like sweet simplicity is necessary when it comes to defining some of the things that we walk out in life. Instead of making it complicated, you want to be able to give people handlebars to be able to steer through the various things that show up in life.
That's good.
So my definition of integrity was simply being who you said you're going to be, or who you said you weren't going to, not being who you said you weren't going to be, or doing what you said you were going to do, or not doing what you said you weren't going to do. Like that was kind of the idea of integrity. And they were kind of able to take that simple definition and apply it to some of the circumstances and instances that they use to define it for themselves.
Yeah. And then I remember when we were talking through this and you was like, so I'm going to give the simple, simplistic answer and then you go do your thing. And so my definition of integrity would be when your said values align with your behaviors. And so I think that actually is, I think a person can determine their growth and they can determine their maturity based on how much their said beliefs align with their actual behaviors. Right, yeah. And I think sometimes, we going to get into something juicy right here. I think sometimes the reason why the world isn't really attracted by the church sometimes is because our said beliefs aren't played out in our actual behaviors.
Be careful with that one.
So it's almost like this. How in the world do you want me to serve a God that hasn't been effective enough to change your behaviors? Because if you want me to get to the God that you're saying can change my life, well, how well has he changed your life? Because without having the proper behavior and having a different set belief, it's actually the definition of being a hypocrite. Wow. Let that sit for a second.
Yeah, I feel like that was like the scene from Why Did I Get Married when she was like,
Boom. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Right.
But I think people need to see that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to our church, to Thrive City Church, that integrity is our identity, because we want to bridge this gap between the said beliefs and the actual behaviors. And so that's really where this vibe and value came from.
Yeah.
It's just wanting to make sure that we do our very best to do that very thing. So can I read the definition now?
Yep. Go for it.
So the definition, and I want to read it exactly how it is. So we believe that a life lived God's way is not just right, but it's better. Christ is the standard, and we submit to his leadership and the wisdom of others as they too follow him. In our steadfast pursuit of God, our goal is to be consistent in our belief and behaviors. We are not perfect, but progressing people who value what God values. Now, I thought the best way that we could break down this episode would be to just simply talk about what does all those sentences mean.
Yeah, because that was a mouthful.
It was.
Yeah.
And there's so much meat, so much treasure in that.
Yeah.
I think it'd just be good if we just go through it just sentence by sentence.
All right.
You ready?
Let's hit it.
All right. First statement. We believe that a life lived God's way is not just right, but it's better. I think many times when we look in the Bible, we see all these things that God told us to do. It's like, don't steal, don't cheat, don't commit adultery, obey your mother and your father, all of these things that God says. And sometimes we can look at them as restrictions. But then there are other times we can look at it and be like, honor your mother and father. That's probably just right to do, right?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we don't realize that God created us, and with creating us, he created the way in which that thing is supposed to function, operate at its optimal ability. And so there are realities with sometimes we look at what God says as just the right thing to do, but I want to challenge us to see it as it's actually the better thing to do. Yeah. In Genesis, he tells Adam and Eve, hey, don't eat of the fruit, of the forbidden fruit. And I think what's interesting is that, okay, because he said it, it just should have been right. But what they didn't understand is that they were forfeiting better.
That's good.
Because now they were going to have to deal with childbirth pains. Come on. 4 times.
4 times.
4 times over. Some of y'all got 6. Some of you got 8. But pain during childbirth, now there was going to have to be work, that the land just wasn't going to produce the way that it was. All those things. Watch this. God was telling them don't do this. Not because it was just right. It's like, man, this is actually the better way.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think sometimes if we were to look at it that way, we would see that God isn't trying to restrict us from things. He isn't trying to take things away from us. He's actually trying to better our lives because he knows the better outcome is through his ways.
Yeah. I think when I look at it, I see the word, God's way is not just right. It's better. I think of right. And how they say righteousness or holiness and righteousness, that's still right. It's the right thing to do. And like you were saying with the word better, what I see is what the word says that we're supposed to move from like faith to faith and from glory to glory. Yeah. So to me, that shows an improvement. That shows that things are supposed to continually get better.
That's good.
And the only way things are able to continually get better is if we first know what's right to do. Yeah. So it's following, what God is saying in his word about living righteously, righteously or doing something right can be one person's perspective. It's like, one person say this is right, to do it this way is right. But when we look at what God says, God's way of doing it, and we do it his way of doing it, it's not just the right way of doing it. It brings improvement to our lives.
That's good.
It brings that increase of faith to faith, and it brings that increase of glory that he's able to show in our lives and going from glory to glory. And so to me, it's like, it's necessary, especially if we're calling ourselves believers. Yeah. If we're saying we're a believer, if we're saying we're a follower of Christ, we have to first solidify what is right, but understand how it impacts our lives. And then I also think the better is how it impacts other people's lives. Yeah. Because then we get to be an example of that righteousness. And not only are we getting better, we're helping others become better as well.
Yeah. I'm going to mess some people up right here.
Okay.
I'm going to mess some people up.
You good at doing that?
So looking at it from the perspective of sex, right? I know we're getting ready. By the time this podcast episode drops, we're either going to be in relationship month or headed into it. Okay. But the Bible talks about not having sex before you get married, right? And we would look at that like restrictive.
That's a touchy subject.
It's a touchy subject. But here's my question. If as a single person, I can't tell myself no, when I end up getting married, what makes me think that I just automatically get a knower in my spirit?
That's good.
See, in single life, when you're saying no to sex, what you're simply doing is you're putting a cap on your flesh and saying, I know how to control you. Mm-hmm. Because when I get married, the only thing that it does is that my fornication just morphs into adultery.
Right.
And there's more at stake at this point because now I'm married, I have a spouse, and I could have kids. Yeah. And so because I didn't do it God's way to start with, I then have a hard time seeing it through in another season.
Right. And you don't get to experience the better.
Exactly. Because if you knew how to say no in your single season, you know how to say no in your married season better.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
All right.
Hope y'all taking notes.
Hope you're taking some notes. So the second sentence says, Jesus is the standard and we submit to his leadership and the wisdom of others as they too follow him. Now, here's the thing. Jesus is the standard. Can you say it? Jesus is the standard. And I think where we get in trouble sometimes is that we make man the standard.
Right.
We make people the standard. We start to compare ourselves and say, well, I'm doing better than such and such. I'm doing better than them. And the reality is that that's not the standard. Man is never the standard. And get this about standards. Standards is actually the basement of the belief. The standard isn't actually like high.
Right.
Standard just simply means baseline.
It's like the line that says it's your reasonable service.
Come on. And I think sometimes if we're saying that Jesus is the standard, that means man always falls short of the standard.
Right. Wow. Uh-oh.
And so when we talk about integrity, I think some people don't have self-integrity because they haven't actually learned how to be themselves because they're trying to compare themselves to others and become a carbon copy of someone else.
Yeah.
And I would say this, you can't operate in integrity being a fake.
Cannot. You shaking some stuff up right now.
I'm shaking it up. We some podcast episodes in. So at some point, we just going to have to give them what they're going to expect at Thrive City. And here's the reality. What we want to do is we want to help people to understand that Jesus is the standard. That's why we tell you to study Jesus' life, because in order to become Christ-like, you got to know who Jesus was and what he did. You got to,
I think one part of it, how you said Jesus is the standard, and our goal obviously is to become like Jesus, right? And I believe there's always this becoming that we're always in the process of. I say it that way, and I think it's because Jesus is in the business of helping us to become the best version of ourselves. Yeah. And so, like you said, you can't walk in integrity if you're not being who you authentically are. Yeah. And so from the beginning, he said, I knew you before you were even in your mother's womb. So from the beginning, he's about making sure that you're integrous as you continue to walk through life, as you continue to grow and as you continue to become. Yeah. And so I think it is necessary for us to not have this measuring stick that has someone else's name on it, and make sure that our measuring stick has the name of Jesus on it. So that when we're looking into the mirror and we see those places where we're going off or we're going wrong, it's not compared to where someone else is. Because we can look at someone else and say, well, they did that and they made it through, or they didn't have some horrible thing happen in their life. They didn't fall apart. They're still successful. Their marriage is still intact. Their kids are okay. But then we'll try to walk in those same footsteps in that same way. And we're wondering, well, why is my marriage messed up? Why are my kids out here wilding out and stuff? And it's really because we put someone else's name on the measuring stick and we didn't ask, just like at the beginning, what was the first part? God's way is right, and is not just right, it's better. Yeah. And so when we are able to apply God's way to our own individual life and let him shape us and grow us and allow us to become who he said we are, then that's the perfect picture of integrity.
You said a mouthful right there. You should probably rewind that part and just listen to that little snippet. The second part, though, I think is just as important, because while Jesus is the standard, we also want to draw from the wisdom of other people who are following him. Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Yeah. And I think sometimes our blessings walk in on two legs, but because of pride, many times we won't expose ourselves to someone else that really is supposed to also help us
Yeah.
to live at a standard. I just don't think, this is just me, when you're serious about change and development and growth, accountability is like a non-negotiable.
Right.
When you get serious, someone can't tell me they're serious and they don't have accountability. I just don't believe it. Because reality is that accountability, whether that's in your marriage, whether that's mentorship, whether that's counseling, whether that's therapy, whatever it may be that's helping you to become better, you have to have that type of relationship.
Yeah.
And I think we do ourselves a disservice because we don't want to let nobody in our business. And then this is what we do. We start saying stuff like our grandmama and grandfather used to say, that whatever goes on in this house
stays in this house.
And then your issues and your problems will stay in your house.
Yeah.
But we trying to help you get free. We are trying to help you get free.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to pull on the wisdom of other people. You know, I think it will help kind of almost short circuit some of the things that we don't have to walk through in life. That we can take the wisdom that others have gained from the experiences that they've had, and we can say, let me learn from that.
Yeah.
Let me add that to my wheelhouse, and let me add that to my collection, and let me learn, okay, well, when this happens, or when I approach this certain circumstance, or this point, or this point in the journey of life, I can apply that same wisdom. Not necessarily do it specifically the same way, but learn the principles on how to approach the different things that are going to come up in life. I think it's no, in Ecclesiastes how the Bible talks about that there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Right? So that means that there are going to be some general circumstances, general things that are just going to arise in life.
Yeah.
Just general things, basic things that are going to happen. And we do ourselves a disservice if we're not trying to grab a hold of the wisdom that other people are offering and saying like, hey, you know, I want to prevent you from bumping your head in this area.
Yeah.
But we, like you said, we let pride show up, and we're like, I'm not going to tell anybody about what's going on. So then it's like you shut yourself off to the ability to obtain the wisdom you need to overcome the very situation you're in.
So good. All right, we about to run out of time. So we got two more sentences. It says, "It is in our steadfast pursuit of God, our goal is to be consistent in our beliefs and our behaviors." And we kind of talked about that already, that we really believe the litmus test for maturity and the litmus test for growth is when your beliefs and your behaviors, they align. So that's the question. When you walk in integrity, your said beliefs line up with your actual behaviors. Not about to mess someone up. Then it's got to be quick.
You keep messing people up.
But this is why I think the enemy works overtime to alter and cause us to have dysfunctional beliefs. Because if I can get your belief off, I can get your behavior off. Then you can never walk in integrity.
Right.
And so this is why we are so adamant about making sure that we're teaching from a perspective of what does the Bible say about this? Because it is the best piece of information, the best place that you can go for reliable information in the world. And if we can align our beliefs, even sometimes when we may disagree with what the belief is, because sometimes you got to go into the word. I've had to read things and be like, Lord, help my unbelief on this one. Because some of them are difficult. But if we can get our beliefs to be solid, that's when we start to see our behaviors get in the right place, and we start to see the fruit that we're actually looking for.
Right. And you can't leave out the part that talks about being consistent in it. It's one thing to align and one thing to know what your beliefs are and kind of like solidify them. But then you also, it can't just be my belief is this in this situation and my belief is that in that situation. But then in these other situations, you know, if they say the right thing, you know, it can't be that.
Yeah.
It has to be a consistent walking out those beliefs. And that's where you're going to find the success and the growth. And that's where you're going to find where people can trust you. It can't be in one moment you're walking in this belief, and then the next moment, because the person said the wrong thing or the right mix of the situation happened, that you're showing up differently. That's a lack of integrity.
So what you're saying is you can't compartmentalize your integrity.
Oh, absolutely not.
How many rooms are you integrous in?
Wow, that's a good question.
And that brings us to the last thing, because I don't want anyone to leave with condemnation.
Yeah.
Is that our last sentence is we're not perfect, but we're progressing. but we value what God values. And so we're not telling you that you got to be perfect and get everything right. A lack of integrity comes when it is that your beliefs and your behaviors, they don't align. But when we talk about just living a life where you are doing your best to continuously grow in your beliefs and then get your behaviors to align with those beliefs, when you're progressing to do that, I believe God is pleased with that dynamic. Yeah. So we're not expecting perfection. And also at Thrive City, we understand we are not a perfect church. We will not be a perfect church,
right?
Because we have imperfect people that are going to come to the church. We as leaders are imperfect people. And so reality is that perfection is not the goal.
No,
progression is the goal. And I think that's where we'll be able to find that God will continue to work with us so that our beliefs and our behaviors align.
Absolutely. That's good. Yeah. That's a good thing to leave them with.
All right. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much. I actually want to pray this episode.
Okay.
Can we do that?
We could do that.
So, Father, in Jesus' name, Lord, I just pray, dear God, for those who are working through their integrity right now. God, that they have some beliefs and they can tell that their behaviors don't align with those beliefs. And I'm asking, God, that you would empower them, that you would give them what they need, the grace, the empowerment to live out the life that is going to bring the fruit that you said that we could have. You said the life that you came to give us was an abundant life, and we want to experience that. And I pray that they would experience that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Remember, you were not designed to survive. You were designed to thrive. Peace.
Love you guys.